Hello, everyone. It's Mark Golthy here, Canadian immigration lawyer, back again with another Immigration Nation session with my special guest, Betsy Kane. She's going to be joining me in a second. Those of you who are tuning in, there will maybe be a place for you to ask a few questions as we go throughout. But those of you who are tuning in and watching this as a live stream, this is all about an opportunity for Mark to highlight and showcase the amazing immigration lawyers that we have across the country. I'm hoping to do this every week. And Betsy is my subject for today. And she is well deserving as being one of the highest and most respected lawyers that we have across the country that practice immigration. And it's interesting. I'm going to pull in Betsy right now. So there she is. How are you, Betsy? Thanks for joining.
I'm good, surviving. What are we in month 8 of this?
I think so. Right around, I think right around 8 months. Yeah. And how's everybody in your firm doing?
We're doing good. I want to place a wager. I'm not usually into betting, but I want to place a wager with you as to when the borders are going to actually open, because I have a feeling in my mind when it's going to be, and it keeps getting pushed out. But I think this is no longer a short-term stopgap measure anymore.
No, I don't think so. I think we're going to be seeing a new landscape going forward. That's for sure. Yeah. All right. So what I want to do before I get jumping too far ahead here, Betsy, is I want to tell everybody about you and your firm so that they know who we're dealing with here. So I'm just going to flip over, and it's amazing if you guys out there, as we're doing this live Immigration Nation, if you could see this screen and everything that's going on as we make this production available, it is crazy. But what I wanted to share with you guys first is just Betsy's site. So this is where you can go, Capel Kane, Immigration Lawyers, Ottawa. That's where Betsy's based, and she has a fantastic team of lawyers working with her. She's got herself, she's got Phil here, and Tamara, all awesome immigration lawyers. And I also want to highlight all of you out there who are having a horrible experience with the pandemic. Betsy and her team have actually really focused on this area. And in even some of the recent conversations I've had with them, the things that they've had to do to help their companies manage to get their workers here are unbelievable. And that's something I definitely want to highlight. And then as we get going on a little bit more, you'll get a chance to learn a little bit more about the exact kind of work that Betsy does. But this is all about highlighting my good friend Betsy here and all of the amazing work that she's and her team have been doing. We've already got thumbs up, Betsy. Like, I've got stuff here already with lots of people posting comments. Those who are posting comments, hang tight for a little bit. We will get to you. But listen in as we share a little bit about Betsy and her firm. So, Betsy, this is all about an opportunity to talk about anything and everything immigration. Okay. And so, do you have any particular topics that you want to address as we, anything that comes to mind with this crazy pandemic and everything that's going on?
Well, I think one of the things that when we all come out of this, I think the issue that's going to be foremost in everybody's mind is what compliance measures or what type of compliance reviews, inspections, and other types of compliance issues are going to come to light when the borders reopen and the government has more time to review whether employers have complied with their obligations as employers under both Ontario or any provincial law, because employment law is under provincial law. So what are the challenges between the federal immigration law governing employers and the provincial laws that have been amended to deal with infectious disease leave and other types of infectious disease changes to employment law? I think that is something that we are going to grapple with for years to come once this is all over. The issue of people who may have been offside their quarantine. Is the government going to initiate enforcement action about people who may or may not have adhered to the terms of their quarantine? And I find I think that issue, in terms of the adherence of the quarantine, I think that's going to be a really tough nut for the government to crack, because they can't even monitor who's under quarantine and who's not. So how are they going to enforce it?
I know.
So I think that's a big issue. And I think there's going to be a silver lining from all of this, both from the government side and from practitioners' side. This situation has injected compassion into the immigration process like I have not seen in 25 years. Instead of taking out and making everything a objective regulatory decision, we have now injected a human element into immigration, which was sorely needed. And I hope that this human element will continue to play a governing presence over how Canada delivers their immigration programs and sets their policy.
I've seen that as well, Betsy. We still look at the newspaper and we see all of the, just the way that they rolled out all of these exemptions to the quarantine requirements. And we've seen how they've rolled out the ability, the travel restrictions, and slowly open things up by cohort by cohort. And I have the opportunity to appear before the standing committee to talk about the impacts of COVID on immigration. And it's amazing to see how broad these impacts have stretched, not just, individuals and families, but companies. And trying to navigate this whole process has been an absolute crazy nightmare. And the government can't keep up, right? You get orders in council that is coming. You've got facts saying one thing. You've got the border officers saying another thing. And companies don't know what the heck they're doing. Well, they do their very best. We try to advise them, and then we don't sleep at night, right? While we're waiting for someone to travel to the border. And then on top of it, like you identified, what are they going to do with this compliance stuff? Because this is uncharted territory.
And not only that, we have the laws, and the laws are clear. But the officers who are applying this law do not have the time to read these laws and digest them and comprehend how they are going to work in practice, and then roll out the messaging across all lines of business, and making sure the visa office, the liaison officers, the airlines, the port of entry officers, that everybody's on side. We kill ourselves really to learn this, and we think we understand it. And then, somebody who doesn't have the time, and you have to have empathy. They don't have time to put in an 8-hour shift and then spend another 8 hours at night to read it all, but we have to. We don't have a choice. I wish we could just punch the clock at 5, but we can't.
No.
And so we're there. We have to be the kind of like the checkers. We're like what do they call that? The checks and balances, where the officer says you need a work permit. Well, let's just read this. We go from A to B to C, and nowhere does it say you need a work permit. But because we are dealing with people who have not been steeped into the weeds of these laws and these policies, both as published on the CBSA website and the CIC website and the FAC website, people are just defaulting to what they think is right, but is not legally correct. And in order to make it work for our clients, we have to basically not follow the law, because it's the only way we're going to get the person here. So you explain this to the client and they think you're insane.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'll give you one example. I had a consult with a client, and it's amazing how people have kind of banded together, right? So when you take the situation of people like spouses, for instance, and whether or not they could come, and who's a family member, and how's all of those issues kind of rolled out. I think about a consult that I had last week with a fellow who said, now finally, people, at least over in India, are getting letters to travel on expired COPRs. Okay.
Really?
So they're finally getting letters, and that sounds great, because there's this big group of people that are basically screwed. That have been, they've given up their jobs like this. Here's an example. So I've got a job. I know I'm coming. My flight is scheduled for March 19th. I'm excited. I've pulled my kids out of school. I've quit my job. I've sold my house. I've got my funds. I'm ready to travel. And then boom, the complete floor is taken out from underneath me. And now I'm waiting for all this time. Finally, I get a letter from immigration that says, all right, here you go. You can now travel on the expired COPR. Just present it at the time of boarding and, welcome to Canada. And then these people go to the airline, and you know where I'm going with this, right, Betsy? You know where I'm going.
I saw it in the newspaper.
They go to the airline, they present the letter, they present their expired COPR. The nice flight attendant says, that's an expired COPR. I cannot board you. You are not boarding. But the letter, sorry, I can't help you. So it is so frequent that we hear these stories. There's so many moving parts. The airlines, the border, FAC, IRCC, so many of these different bodies. And yeah, so when it comes to this whole crazy situation we're dealing with right now, when is the end going to come? Like when is everything going to be sorted out?
Well, that's the problem. And, the longer the government pushes this to the back burner, the longer we are going to be in this to sort it. And we are reading about these stories in the news. And I think what we have become is travel agents. Like just this week, I had to advise somebody on a global talent stream work permit and think about, what's going to happen if the United States will be able to lift their travel ban for European clients or European travelers. And we basically devised a plan where we either wait for the visa office in London to issue the letter of whatever they call it, letter of introduction, or if Biden rolls back the executive order, we fly him from London to New York or London to Chicago, one flight, and then we buy a separate ticket from New York or Chicago to Canada so that the boarding agent in London does not know he's destined for Canada, so that we can just pass the hoop. So now I never was a travel agent, but now I'm a travel agent, which is not where I anticipated doing at the latter part of my career.
I just had to pull this comment on. So Alva here, this is his comment. I don't know, Betsy, would you agree with that? He basically says
it's 8 months.
He basically says, damn COVID.
Yeah, well, I really want to go somewhere, and I would wish this is over. But as I said at the beginning of our discussion, I don't think we are going to see any kind of movement on the border. My original prediction was April, but now I'm saying June. And because there's been different expressions of dates by the government of Canada in connection with certain programs, where the April date has been used, the June date, I believe it was with regard to the Calgary. Maybe you can speak to that.
Yep.
Mark, about the pilot project in the Calgary airport and the Coutts port of entry. If they're rolling this out till the spring of 2021, that means that there's no plan to open up any international airports in Canada other than the 4 that we've got right now until the second half of 2021 at the earliest. Yeah. So it's going to be a long winter, and we can only do what we can do. And when you say about advising clients and the risk and they getting all these letters from the visa office, I'm sure that the visa office and all the people issuing these letters and GCMS and from case manager, they have the best of intentions, and everybody wants to get it done. Yeah. But is this person going to make it to Canada and be admitted is the issue. And every client that comes through this door, if they are not willing to gamble with the advice that I'm going to give and gamble with the strategy that's used, I can't take them, because I don't even know what's going on. I had a client today who wanted a quarantine exemption for their essential service workers in the food processing, manufacturing, and delivery of healthcare services. And, they tried to get an exemption on their own, and they want me to do it. And the guy's coming at the end of November. Can you get it done? I said, no, I can't get it done, and I certainly can't guarantee it. And unless you're going to prepare to take risk with me, I can't help you, because I can follow every law and it still might go in the dumpster.
Yeah. And that's the part that is just so stressful for us, right? And
Yeah.
genuinely, we truly want to be giving proper advice to our clients. And we're
I know. I
used to
feel
having we're used to having all the answers. We're used to being able to know where to go. We may not know the exact answer in this very moment, but we know
yeah.
where to look. And give us 5 minutes, give us 10 minutes, whatever. We'll go take a peek. We'll get back to you, but we can always have that certainty. But that has been the thing that has been completely removed from this equation. And when I know that I am trying to advise a corporation with an individual that they desperately need to transfer to Canada, or even to get someone in to commission some equipment for this important project where there are not millions, but well, hundreds of millions of dollars at stake, the jobs of Canadians. And we're having to tell this company, well, I think this is probably going to work. My goodness, you just don't sleep at night. And because you're just not used to being in this situation. And like you identified, Betsy, the problem is that we have to tell our clients, look, everything we say is qualified, right? And just because we're giving you what's correct in law does not mean that that's what's going to apply when you're actually seeking to travel.
Yeah, we had a crazy situation yesterday. My colleague Tamara, we got the travel exemption. We got the person to travel from Europe. We got the travel exemption. The guy comes through primary, he goes through secondary. He's supposed to get a letter or some document confirming that he has been given the quarantine exemption. Sorry, the quarantine exemption.
Mm-hmm.
So he's corresponding with the HR director at the company, and the HR director is saying to him, "Do you have the quarantine exemption paper?" And he goes, "No." And my app, because you're supposed to get this information now about whether you've been granted the quarantine exemption in your app, the quarantine exemption box has not been ticked. So what do? I'm now outside of CBSA secondary area. What do I do? So of course, Tamara's contacted. What do? She calls CBSA at Pearson. Pearson says, "Sorry, we can't do anything. He's already left. He's left our area." She goes, "Excuse me. This person got a quarantine exemption. This person is coming to Canada to service the government of Canada, by the way, and they are needed, and they are not going to go on site without confirmation of the quarantine exemption. This is government business. We can't fool around." And he didn't want to basically bring the guy back to give him the whatever code he needed to input in his app so that he could have the tick on his app so that he could show the employer that he's completely clean to go into the facility. And the officer didn't want to do it. And it's like, Tamara just called up and says, like, "Dude, we're doing this for you. We're doing this for the government of Canada. Like, we're not fooling around here. Could you just kind of give him a piece of paper or something so the guy can just move on with his merry day and actually conduct the work that he was coming to Canada? Because we're not going to put him in a hotel for 2 weeks so he can watch movies." And finally, he relented. Yeah. And it was like, oh my God, like just to go through secondary is like heroic efforts. And it's like, you can't charge the client for navigating and trying to reason with someone who essentially was too lazy to bring a guy back and flew all the way from Europe to fix machinery that is important to the government of Canada. And you don't want to go into your computer and look for a code so the guy can put it in his app so that he can have, so that the employer and the person concerned can ensure they're compliant with the law and not face a $750 fine. Like, this is not, this is not pickup sticks. There's a lot going on here, and there's a lot at stake.
Yeah. It's interesting. One of the things I think that's most difficult for me, and I've got a lot of respect for the border. I worked on the border myself as an officer. Betsy, I know you did a little bit of work, did you as well at the airport? I can't remember.
Not at the airport, at CIC National Headquarters.
Okay. All right. Well, so we have an understanding of what's going on behind the curtain. And I've got compassion for the CBSA officers who are trying to navigate this stuff and trying to figure out how best to try to accommodate people. But when you tell me stories like this, and we hear about them all across the country, it just kind of angers me, especially when we know they are not overworked. It's not like there are so many people coming through there, right?
Let me tell you a story, a crazy story in my area of another crazy story. Exactly. They're not overworked. It's not like they have huge traffic and they can't manage the traffic. Oh my God. So listen to this. Okay.
Okay.
I don't even know where to start. because you know the deal. So we have a port of entry in our neck of the woods. Is one of the notorious ports of entry for exceptional client service.
I understand. Yes.
Yes. And so anyway, poor fellow, he actually comes from a border community. He had an in Canada spousal pending. And unfortunately, he got notice. He got a letter saying that his driver's license was up for renewal in upper New York State. And he had to appear, otherwise they were going to revoke his license. He had to go and pay whatever for the sticker that you put on your car. Additionally, he had a work-related accident, and because he was new to Canada, he didn't have a family physician. So he went back to upper New York State, literally 75 miles from Ottawa, in order to renew his prescription because he didn't have a family doctor who could issue the prescription so that he could get it in Ottawa. So he'd crossed the border many times, but one day in late October, at the height of the government's development of the family unification plans and during the height of the announcement to allow extended family members to come to Canada, the Border Services officer determined that he would overstay his temporary residence status, even though he had proof that his application for permanent residence was filed along with an open work permit application. And in order to make sure that he had temporary residence status, he also applied for a visitor record because he had one and he wanted to extend that one again. And he thought maybe he could get it faster than the open work permit. And he had the receipts and he had everything. And he actually even had one of those dummy acknowledgement letters with the X number showing that his application was in process. And the officer was so concerned that he would violate immigration law. Meanwhile, yes, Bill Blair and Mark Mendocino are developing policies and they're being rolled out. Dual intent language and messaging is changing. But the officer at the border thinks this guy is going to go underground and he's going to work illegally. Yeah. So they stop him and they give him allowed to leave. And as we all know, recently in April 2020, the federal court opined that the allowed to leave procedure that the CBSA relies on to say that the person was offered the opportunity to withdraw their application, when we know it was a disguised refusal per the federal court, he was turned back and separated from his spouse with an in-Canada application with 2 temporary residence applications pending. Wow. So he came to me. I was super busy. I didn't have time. But after I was able to get through some PNP urgencies, I called up the manager who I knew from another life at CBSA, and I explained the situation. And I said, did you happen to know the dual intent language was changed last week? Did you happen to know that, Marco Mendocino is now allowing extended family, boyfriends and girlfriends, okay, can come, grandmothers can come, but the spouse of a Canadian citizen who has 2 temporary residence applications pending, they are a risk to go underground, even though we have a policy that facilitates it. So, I pulled together some Twitter messaging. I even pulled together the CBSA messaging on family unification and threw in that federal court decision on disguised refusals. And what do you know? 2 hours later, the guy was invited to come back to the port of entry. And with a nice, medical insurance policy that we got on short order from David Cummings Insurance, my preferred service provider for my clients. The guy was at the port. He had his insurance policy. He had all his dual intent documentation and my phone number. And he was welcomed back to Canada with a smiling face. However, they wouldn't give him a visitor record because they said that could screw up his permanent residence application. So God help them if they gave him a long-term visitor record. But we smiled,
said,
drove
thank you
to
very
Ottawa,
much,
and we're dealing with it now. But that is something so simple. And, that's just an unusual situation, though, because most CBSA officers and most people on the front line are compassionate, informed people. But you do get some people, they're just looking to make your life horrible. And it was really, what was really unfortunate? And the guy's going to actually communicate this to CBSA. The officer told him that they was trying to purposely rustle him up and question him and see. They went through his phone. They went through his tablet. They went through his car. They thought that he had some kind of contraband. They said to him the reason they were questioning him so hard because they wanted to see if he could lose his composure And if he did, then he would they would issue him a 12-month ban. But because he didn't lose the composure and he kept it together, they allowed him to leave Canada without the removal order, without a 12-month. Like, is that the way a professional acts? Like, if we did something like that, we could be cited for professional misconduct.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And
that's my story
then
of the week.
did he leave a compliment or a complaint on the
Well, we
CBSA
actually right
feedback
before
email?
I have left a compliment. I tried, but their compliment and complaint website doesn't work today. I as counsel was leaving a compliment for the manager who was able to swiftly intervene and turn this around in 2 hours after I gave her all the key documents. Whether this client files a complaint is another story, because I had a case about 18 months ago where we had the very similar situation. And not only did we have a visitor record,
Same port of entry?
Same port of entry. We had a TRP. We had a visitor record. We had gone to the regional manager, and the poor people went back to upstate New York to close their apartment, which they were forced to get because of a separation of families. And when they came back with their furniture, guess what? They weren't allowed to go in again, even though they had 2 documents authorizing their entry. Well, it was a Saturday afternoon, and I was exhausted, and I happened to lie down for a nap on a Saturday afternoon. And I felt my phone buzz beside me, and I see this email, this text message: "Betsy, help, we're stuck at the border. They won't let us back in."
Oh.
I was exhausted. I called up. I said, like, really? The guy has a TRP and a visitor record. I've had to go to your manager. It's a Saturday afternoon. I said, do I have to call him back? Anyway, they let him in. But man,
well,
some ports of entry, you've got those special ones in your neck of the woods.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I'll share a little bit of insight. So obviously when I was on the border as a young summer student, I was between first and second year law school. And it was 2002 when the legislation was changing. IRPA was being rolled out. And I remember the thing that amazed me the most was, well, let's just say the diversity in decision making that existed within the same exact port of entry. So we had some officers, and there were 3 that trained me that I worked with a lot, the late shifts and through the day. And there was an entire spectrum of facilitation. So there was one that was extremely enforcement minded. And I'll never forget that his strategy, or the thing that he told me, is he said, sometimes it takes a sneak to catch a sneak. So in other words, his approach that he took was to kind of, well, I don't know if he would outright misrepresent, but he would definitely use some pretty creative strategies to get the person to say whatever he needed them to say so that he could return them. Then there was another one on the other side that was completely reasonable, that understood the law, which is a pretty important factor. And when you do understand the law, at least the officers that do, you'll see that there's tremendously more compassion in them than those who don't, who are using the brusque kind of very confrontational approach to mask the fact that they don't always know what they're doing. So they try to scare you to keep you off your, on your toes and off balance. And then there was another officer that was kind of middle of the road. And really the decision depended upon whether or not he was having a good day or not. And so I realized right away that the discretion that exists within the CBSA is both a blessing and a curse. So I would never, ever, Betsy, want to see a world where there was no discretion built into it, where an officer felt that they were always bound to make a certain decision if they were faced with a certain fact pattern, kind of similar to their little directives that they were given to try to navigate who could come in and who couldn't, the policy directives that they'd issued, the CBSA. But regardless, this whole experience taught me just how important it is to when you approach, to do everything in your power to limit that officer's discretion down to nothing. Do not leave anything to chance. Because you don't know whether you're going to get good cop, bad cop, or, schizophrenic cop. And that's what I realized.
You got to pad them. You have to make sure they have all the documents on their person. You have to make sure they know what's in those documents so that they're not fumbling at the port of entry. You have to make sure that the client is briefed on the various composure that the officers may present when questioning them, and to be firm with their own perspective on their file. It's a lot more work. We're now counselors, really. You can't believe how many times I've had to tell somebody, keep it in check, smile, thank them, even if it's a negative decision. We can fix it later.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the that's the difficult part is the fact that that there's been a mistake made, and the inability to correct it before it's fully crystallized can be one of the most frustrating things. And then the steps that you have to go through. And Betsy, one of the reasons I really wanted to bring you on is you identified it. Saturday afternoon, trying to take a nap, the phone buzzes and you respond, right? And that's what being an immigration lawyer is all about. We truly do go the extra mile. And when we have a client that is in rough situation, we don't just shrug our shoulders and say, sorry, I'm off right now. The office is closed. I can't help you. You're going to have to wait till Monday, right? We don't do that. We do whatever we can to try to help them. And, it's really, really frustrating when you can see something happening, what's wrong, and there isn't anything you can do about it on that, on the spot.
Well, during COVID, every client has our cell phone. She has a colleague's cell phone. Whenever they're going through certain ports of entry, they like anything around here, they have our cell phone. They have to have our cell phone because there's just, we don't know. It's kind of like going into one of those rides at Disney World. You don't know what's going to happen when you come out. So I don't like giving out my private cell phone, but it's more and more required. And unfortunately, now we don't have international flights coming from Ottawa, which is how most of my corporate clients were coming.
Yes.
So they're either coming into Toronto, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with Toronto. It's just that they're the big hub for Eastern Canada, but for Montreal, obviously, for Ontario. I can't rely on the knowledgeable employees that I know in my region. And so a lot of people are using the land ports, and the land ports are just as confused and overwhelmed as we are. We're all in this together, like they say. We are all in this together because the amount of information is insane. And I think there was one of our colleagues on Twitter said, like, if we thought we had to digest so much information pre-COVID, it's like having a fire hose down your mouth every single day to try to digest what it is that's coming down. And you can't. At a certain point, your mind just turns off and you have to park it and look at it another time, and hopefully it'll sink in the second or third time you read it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that, Betsy, because I think people don't always appreciate, what it takes to try to be current with what's happening.
Yeah.
When the orders in council, yes, are somewhat rolling out on a monthly basis, but the program delivery instructions, the things that are being relayed to the airports, the delays, the inconsistencies, times when the PDIs are not properly reflecting what the new order in council is stating, and then the attempts to actually interpret it. And if us as immigration lawyers who spend our lives, our professional lives, it's our obligation to know the law. If we ourselves are struggling at the rate we are right now to keep up, I can only imagine what people are trying to do when they're navigating this on their own. And, I do a lot of consults each week with people all over the world who are in these horrible situations because of COVID. We're in uncharted waters for sure. But I look
it's no one's fault. I mean,
no,
I think IRCC, I've got to commend IRC. They're doing the best they can.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But while they're working remotely, many of us are not working remotely. Many of us are in the trenches here. We're not seeing clients, but we're doing everything virtually. And clients are dropping off packages at our offices, and we're sanitizing them and leaving them be for 24 hours. I don't have the luxury of working from home. I have clients that need me, and IRCC has clients that need them.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I wish I had the luxury to work from home and to say, I'm worried about my safety. I am worried about my safety, but I still
Yeah.
have to get it done.
Yeah.
And
And you,
they have to change their procedures. If they don't like if paper applications are no longer viable, then we have all of us lawyers have scanned every single page back and forth. We've got the back of the envelopes. We can email it to them. We can shrink it. I Love PDF is a wonderful program. You
yes.
know,
Hmm. Yeah.
save as reduced.
Yep.
We can make their life easier. Get with the program. Let's
Yeah.
send our files in electronically. Make it electronic, even if you don't have the
Yeah.
platform. If we can send in GTS LMIAs by email, we can send in spousal sponsorships by
Yeah.
email. You
Absolutely. And
know?
I just finished just about an hour and a half before I got on with you, Betsy. We had our semi-annual meeting with ESDC, their operations and policy, and they're great. They're just really, really good, wonderful individuals, and we had really productive meetings. And
That's
this is something
fantastic
that
to
we
hear.
highlighted to them. We said, look, this development, and we really commended them for what they've been able to do. Now, the processing times, there are issues that they're working through, the online system, but the fact that they opened up the ability to send those in via email, and they're not looking at closing it off anytime soon. They're going
Yeah,
to keep it open. But what a
yeah.
wonderful, practical, simple solution. And in future Immigration Nation episodes, I'm going to bring on some of our litigators, Betsy, and I look at just our courts and the desperate need there was to modernize that system, that now they're being forced to do things that they should have done 10 years ago. And
No,
there's
it's
no
fantastic.
reason why everything has to be in person, why everything has to be via paper. And I know that there is, from the standpoint of this in the midst of a pandemic, we have to be, we have to look at the side of the glass that's half full. And there's going to be some long-standing changes that are going to benefit everybody because
I agree.
they were forced to it. Now, I'm going to step back and I'm going to qualify those hearings, those appeals, those things where, having someone in person, being able to see them, communicate with them. I am 100% on side with that. The
Yeah, no, for
best
sure.
option always is to have those hearings in person. But where lives are being put in abeyance, where they're being put on standstill, all because, well, we don't have the processes or systems in place to be able to deal with this electronically. Like, it's just not
Yeah,
acceptable in this world. It's
it
not.
isn't.
And I look at the
Yeah,
refugee claimants, Betsy. I look at the refugee claimants who filed claims and are just waiting, right? They're waiting for the opportunity to have IRCC do their part so that they can get their open work permits while they're waiting for everything else to finalize. And and to have them, I look at them being in limbo, just sitting, some of the most vulnerable people. And I don't practice refugee law at all,
okay.
but when I see what's happening, when I hear what our colleagues are saying across the country, like things can improve, things can be done better. But I'll add one more extra layer of qualification, and that's on the fact that IRCC, I've been extremely impressed with what they've done to this stage. They've
No,
opened
so
up, they've been so transparent. When our meetings with the CBA, they were almost weekly at one point. Then they went to every 2 weeks, and then they shifted now to monthly. But the opportunity to hear what they're doing, to provide feedback to them as to what's actually occurring on the ground, has
yeah.
been just something I've been so grateful for our current government and what the work that the civil servants have been doing. But it doesn't mean that there isn't still room for improvement.
Well, I mean, listen, the more you put your head in the sand, the problem is going. So the spousal sponsorships, the PNPs, the Quebec skilled workers, all these are paper-based applications sitting in Nova Scotia. How many more rubber bins from Walmart can you fill before you realize that it's time to send these applications by email? And you know what I'm doing now? I just started that this week. I'm telling clients to only provide documents on single sides. Some people, they're always looking to save paper and they
Yeah.
want to do double-sided documents and double-sided forms. I said, no, we're doing single side because this has to go through a scanner fast. and you want to make it easier for if we have at a later date, if CIC finally sees the writing on the wall and we have to flip the application by email, make it easy for the officer.
Yeah. Yeah.
No
And
paper, no more individual photos. We're going to scan them all on a single piece of paper. And just because we know this, at the end of the day, it's being scanned anyway. So if they change their policy and they realize they just can't manage the paper, at least have it in a format so that they can accept it. And the other thing is CIC needs to be able to take documents more than 4 MB. Make it the capacity so we can actually send you documents instead of shrinking it so that nobody can actually read it.
Yeah. Yeah. You brought up something just in passing that I latched on to, Betsy. As immigration lawyers, the one thing that we do and the one thing that we focus on most is trying to make the lives of the officers adjudicating it as easy as possible. We put things together in a way that it is, it's as easy as possible to assess, adjudicate. The information is there. And that's our role. And I always get so frustrated. You look at the IRCC website all over the map. It says, you don't need to hire anyone. And we can have our discussions about all the representatives. We won't go down that rabbit hole. But the reality is, our desire is truly to make the lives of the officers easier. That's why we do what we do. And we know why. We've got a self-interested, motive behind that, because we know if we do it right, the client's application is going to get approved and they're not going to miss something. And so this concept of expanding these, what ESDC is doing on these LMIAs to be able to do that for spouses makes perfect sense in the world. And
there's no highly contentious documents in a spousal that need to be be inspected, other than the police check, and they take those in express entry electronically. So what's the big deal?
Yeah, it's interesting, Betsy. I reflect constantly on my experience. That limited experience I had working as an officer. It shaped everything that I do, even the way I work with my clients. To some extent in the initial consultation, I will assess them to see if I believe them. I
agree. You're always doing that credibility assessment.
Yeah. Do I buy what you're telling me here? And if I don't, then we don't work together. My name's going on that application as much as you.
Yeah.
And I think back
I do the same thing.
And I think back, and that's because of the training that I had as an officer, right? And I look back to 2002. There was a time when the G8 summit was happening in Calgary, right? And so this message came out from on high that we need to be careful. We needed to watch these protesters that were coming up from the U.S. and their vegetable oil fueled buses. We needed to carefully vet them and make sure that they weren't some terrorist that was going to blow everything up. And so instilled in us as officers was this fear. Don't you be the guy, right? Don't you be the guy or the girl who lets this terrorist in and blows up all these, the leaders of these countries, right? And so to some extent, as I've watched what's happened with this pandemic, and I've watched the officers, how they've dealt with things at the ports of entry, how quick they are to just turn someone back. I think to a large extent, they also don't want to be the guy or the girl that lets someone in that is infected and then spreads it to everyone else. And, and so I think that's operating in the background, and I can't
it's definitely operating.
I can't fault them for it. Yeah. Or the guy who lets in the big C-suite executive, with a quarantine exemption, and then gets their port of entry identified in the latest CBC Go Public article, or or the Star, right?
I had 2 crazy cases like that. Okay, so right on the long weekend, like the March 13th weekend, I did the first spousal whatever case. I don't even think there was an OIC yet. And so the officer at the port of entry tells the person, "I'm not letting you in. You could be infected. How stupid are you to travel?" Like real bully. What do you call it? I don't want to let you in because you could spread it, and I'm compromising my health even dealing with you is secondary. Like really, she went off. Like I understand the officers were freaked out on that first few weeks, right? Like I understand, but we had to make a complaint because it was pretty egregious.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting is the CDSA, they tape everything at the border, right? They have cameras on their own officers. Yeah. And we did the complaint, and it was very obvious from the comportment of the officer that she was literally shouting at the client. And I believe there was some type of reprimand. So that was like the first weekend, March 13th. I think it was either she came in the 11th or the 13th. So we were able to deal with that, thank God. And then with the executives, like during Thanksgiving weekend, I get this call from a large, very well-known company, and they want to bring in their executives from the United States to come up and celebrate Canadian Thanksgiving with their 1,000 of their closest employees under a tent.
That is non-optional. That is non-optional and non-discretionary, Betsy.
They were going to get a private
How dare
jet.
You question that?
They were going to get a private jet. The first executive was going to board in Florida. Then they were going to fly up to Chicago, get the second executive. Then they were going to go to upstate New York or somewhere in New York, get the third executive, and then fly up to Canada. And they were all going to come in. They needed a quarantine exemption because they wanted to have turkey with their employees. And what did you think about that, Betsy?
Go for it.
And thank God we weren't on a Zoom call, because if they saw my face.
It's only going to cost about $50,000, and I can't guarantee you'll be let in, but I'll help you prepare the package.
So here I am, Betsy Kane. Okay. I'm looking at the OCs and I'm trying to figure out what it is. And I said, listen, I can do this for you, but we're not going to do this because this is dumb.
Yeah.
This is super dumb.
Yeah.
And nobody needs to come and have turkey with their employees during a pandemic. So can you just go away?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they went away.
You know what? And that's a fair example of, once again, what we do, right?
Yeah.
Not only do we make sure packages are complete and perfected and submitted properly so that the clients get it approved, but we also tell our clients when they're out to lunch or when they don't have a chance of qualifying.
I know, but it was like, oh my God. I was like, I swear to God, like, I think I went home that night and I was like, really? Did I just give that advice? Did someone just pay me for that advice?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And, in a way, we are triage for immigration. And sometimes I don't think they appreciate it. I don't think they appreciate sometimes how often we steer clients away from something that's just going to add, a wasted resource for immigration. And then also to help people know when they legitimately can do what they want to do, whether it's an individual or a company, so that then they can make proper decisions and govern themselves accordingly. I do a fair amount of individual work now, Betsy, for people through Express Entry all over the world. And there's nothing that just tears at my heart more than people who have been duped into spending thousands of dollars to get their profile submitted into the Express Entry pool because they're eligible. Like they have no prayer of getting an ITA. Like no prayer.
We struggle with that. Like, Tamara and I are always struggling. Okay, how much, can we charge a client when, for this, when, and we struggle with that. And like, even my administrative staff says, Betsy, you're not valuing enough what you, what you offer in terms of strategy. You won't, like, I don't even take a consultation. They do, like, it gets vetted at the front end of our offer. If I have nothing to offer, I'm not going to take 5 cents from you.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things too, because, these consults, like I can do 10 consults a day with people that are looking to immigrate. And one thing that I found is as valuable as anything else is to help them to understand when it's just not going to work out and they need to consider another country. They need to, pour their energies back into making the best out of their circumstance in their own country. And even with companies, right, that say, okay, I want to move this person up, or we want to expand into Canada, and our revenues are not great. We're a virtual company. Can we do an ICT? Yeah. And I just had a consult just the other day with someone who's been working virtually from India for the company in the US. And now the US company wants to transfer him to Canada to fill a position like that. And, what's the answer? Well, you're going to have a significantly uphill battle to show how your position that is completely virtual for the company in the US somehow is so critical that they need to set up operations in Canada to allow you to do the same thing virtually. Yes, the time zone consistency is great. I agree with that. But, it's just not so easy. And so we deal with this all the time, don't we?
Well, I gotta share one of everybody that have this thing on Facebook or whatever it's called, your Friday wins. Everybody shares. I'm going to share a win of mine. It wasn't this Friday, but it was a few weeks ago. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just winging it. Okay, but anyway, I did a GTS LMIA for a company. Now everything was legit with the company, but they were always virtual before COVID. They basically, their strategy is, listen, if we can find a guy in Dawson Creek who knows how to program with using whatever JavaScript, we don't care as long as he can do it. So they're completely virtual. So we had to hire a foreign worker. We went through the global talent stream. We flipped him from an employer in Quebec to another employer in Quebec. And then we had to get him also for the national headquarters here in Ottawa. The whole thing was virtual. There is bricks and mortar, but it's like a dummy office. We were completely transparent. The foreign worker works from home in his basement. Everything was completely on. We went to the designated referral channel. It wasn't that. We were completely transparent. This guy's working from his basement. The company's virtual, and their HR strategy is that they go anywhere. And so they are looking for a diverse workforce because they don't care where you are. Anyway, They lapped it up. They loved it. So we got a full virtual company. And I even used the virtuality of their work as a labor market, part of their labor market benefits plan, because it showed diversity and inclusion. Yep. So, it's like, okay, whatever, I'm going with the flow. Anyway, I was so thrilled. The company, it's just like, whatever, Betsy, whatever. It's like, this is what we do. We're virtual. Great. So anyway, that was my win a few Fridays ago. And now the client's all excited about the May 12th public policy to flip work permits. So anyway, I did that. We'll see what happens. I'm only into day 5 of day 10. We'll see how that works.
Well, that's interesting, Betsy, because in our current world and the direction we're going, the concept of working from home is by necessity going to have to be built into the temporary foreign worker program. And in our call today, we had some discussions with the Job Bank, and they're wonderful. If every government department could function as efficiently as the Job Bank does, oh my goodness, the people running that, like 10 stars. But they talked about now that when you're posting advertisements through the Job Bank, you now have the ability to choose whether there's a portion of it that's virtual in nature.
Well,
and that's built into the ads. Yeah, they just started it. But now ESDC and Service Canada have to figure out, okay, well, how are we going to deal with this, right? And then you've got crazy provinces like my own, and that's a separate discussion to vet about what's happening in Alberta, but who have this big, massive black hole now where, if you're on the list, great, you can get it. This very, very minuscule list of occupations. Otherwise, don't even bother, right? And so you look at that, and people who maybe they're living in Alberta and they're working for a company in Ontario. Where is that LMIA based? Is it Ontario or Alberta?
How's that going to shake out, Mark? because are you going to be able to? Are you going to start having to put them on the payroll in Ontario just to make it happen?
Yeah, like these are the challenges that are existing. Yeah. So, or a person who just has to parachute in for maybe, a really, really short period of time. Do we then have to get concurrence from Alberta if they're based in BC and then are coming over? Right?
You do need concurrence. Well, you need concurrence. It took an extra day on my most recent GTS LMIA. Yep. But mine was in Quebec, and I thought, okay, but all they want to make sure is that the prevailing wage that you're paying in the home province matches in the what they called it intermittent location.
Exactly.
That's how it was on the LMIA. Yeah.
The question, Betsy, is in the world of do not process in Alberta, if that knock code that you received the approval for, that you're applying for, that's 95% based in Vancouver, and the person has to go 5% of the time to Alberta, is that going to shut down the ability to go to Alberta if they can't, splice it off? right?
Well,
That's
you're at the
that's
fort. You got to test it, Mark. You got to
yeah.
test
Oh
it and
yeah,
report.
yeah.
I
I've got a
that
client.
I, you
Yep.
yeah.
I've got a
That's what you
client
need
right
to do.
now. And how far can you push the specialized service provider exemption, right? Can you couch it under that, the ad exemption? And so it's very, very interesting to see how, how this is all going to play out.
Well,
So
you should have a show just on with
I know.
Alberta
Yep.
practitioners
Yep.
about how they're navigating this. I
Well,
want
what
to
I'm
tune into that.
Yeah. Well, that's absolutely. And you know what, with this, what we've got going on here, I can bring in 4 other people, have a big group discussion. And I think that would be
Yeah.
really fun. What I really want to do too, Betsy, is bring in one of my companies and have the CEO come join me
Oh wow,
and talk about what's
that's
going
cool.
on. And,
That would be telling.
yeah, this one company I have right now, fortunately, we've been able to dance around things long enough using C10s,
Thank
specialized
God.
service provider. But the
Yeah.
work they're doing is so novel. The technology is coming from Europe. They do not have an ability to train Canadians. They legitimately don't. The projects are very project based. There isn't like 24/7 work that they can bring a Canadian in, give them the 2-3 years of training to then be able to man this, directional drilling equipment. And so they're really they're having to rely a lot on foreign workers to fill a lot of these specialized roles. And then when they come, they're then able to train the Canadians, like the same pattern we have with all of our clients, right? When they're bringing in
Yeah.
people that are specialized, well, eventually there's an expectation that specialization is going to rub off. And so they've been working on this and working on it. But they're in a situation where they're in construction. At least that's kind of where it falls. And if we have to go back to a pure advertising, and the person doesn't want to stay permanently, because remember, that is one out, is to do a dual purpose or otherwise permanent LMIA with a pathway to permanent residence if they fit. But they're going to be screwed. Like, they're going to be in rough shape, and it's going to hamper their growth at a time when Alberta's desperate for companies to grow and to create jobs. And they've been growing and hiring. And so it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Maybe I can get Minister Copping, who's the Employment and Immigration Minister, maybe I can get him to come on with me and my client and have a little discussion. That would be fun.
Well, I think what you should do is get a corporate immigration lawyer, a corporate lawyer on, like a high-level corporate lawyer, and say, okay, are we going to take all these Alberta companies and now incorporate them somewhere else in another province or federally and totally revamp the corporate structure?
Yeah.
Because your foreign worker program is so narrow that we have to basically, not only do we have to reorganize the corporation, but we have to put the head office in Vancouver or in Saskatchewan, because your program doesn't let us operate our business. You're actually constraining our business opportunities. So we're just going to move out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it, right?
Yeah.
We'll offshore in Vancouver then, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty sad when you have to describe it that way.
No, but you got the Saskatchewan PNP is one. Look how easy it is. So the company in Alberta, they want to keep their workers. Hey, well, I mean, it doesn't work for drilling, but it may work for other industries where you say, you know what?
Yeah, let's relocate.
This environment doesn't work for me. Just like we've had, I grew up in Montreal. Okay, I'm a product of the 60s. How many companies pulled up and just left the building? They pulled up and they went down the 401. When I graduated from McGill in 1985, I was at a crossroads. Everybody from McGill, my class of 85, all of us who were destined for law school, everybody went to Toronto. And there were very few of us that stayed in Quebec.
Yep.
And it was an environment that was not very receptive to Anglophones. And now it's a different story. But most of the people who graduated in my class at McGill said, you know what? I have a career ahead of me, and I'm not going to live in an environment which constrains my ability to flourish as a professional, as a human being. And I'm just going to leave. We've got the rest of Canada. And maybe, unfortunately, you're going to have the same backlash in Alberta where businesses say, you know what? I need to keep my business operating, and I'm not going to lose money over the politics of the day. And the politics of the day in Alberta is a young gentleman, or maybe not so young gentleman, who put a wrench into our foreign worker program in 2014. Okay. And we all know who that special person is. Okay. And I lived that like no other lawyer in Canada lived that. And it was painful. And there he is again, pulling out his fancy policies again. And for us older lawyers, we know what's going down. Okay. Yeah. We've seen this act before.
Yeah.
And I just hope that all of my colleagues, you included, and all my other colleagues in Alberta will be able to keep their head high and advise their clients and keep their clients in Alberta and not have to advise them to move elsewhere because of the politics of the day. This is not a labor market issue. This is a political decision, and shame on the government of Alberta for doing this to companies. You're supposed to be helping companies manage the pandemic and come out of this pandemic. And what do? For political reasons, you put a wrench in their business, their ability to operate and expand and continue to keep their Alberta employees employed and feeding their families. And shame on the government for acting in a political fashion. And it's not the first time I've come out and said negative things about Jason Kenney. He's a malicious man. He's a political actor, and he's not too smart.
It's interesting, Betsy. We saw New Brunswick, I think it was, for a short period of time there, attempt, to in another indirect way to block the borders. I think it was New Brunswick, wasn't it? And to close the borders because there was this impression that, the local folks, the local residents will fill those gaps, picking blueberries in the field.
That lasted 2 weeks, that strategy.
It was 2 weeks, right?
Yes.
And so, I, from the standpoint, when I think about this, and I'll play the other side. So I remember when Kenney made those announcements and the whole overhaul in 2014, I remember that. And I remember having a discussion and in one of the the little consultative meetings that he did with employers going across the country. And he referenced the fact that, well, maybe we just have too many Boston pizzas and some of them just need to close if you can't get workers. Maybe, there shouldn't be a reason to have 2 Boston pizzas within 4 blocks.
I dealt with one of those pizza places.
Yep.
I was the first letter that Kenney issued under the 2014 refusal to process or whatever it was, but they were cracking down. Mine was a pizza case.
Yep.
And
yeah.
I don't ever want to do a pizza case again.
No, not at all. No, not at all. Okay. Well, here, are you feeling adventurous? Are you feeling adventurous? Do you want to just pull in some of these questions? Because I can tell you, we've had a ton of people that have been posting questions and
let's go for it.
Okay, so so we're going to open up for a few questions because this is what us immigration lawyers do. It's all about giving back. And Betsy, how much are you getting paid for this? Just remind everybody, okay? How much am I paying you to come appear on my show?
From Mark Holby the next time I see you at an in-person conference, and who knows what year that is going to be. But as I said to all of us, we are not dressing up in our business attire at the next in-person conference. We are all wearing superhero costumes because we are superheroes for surviving the pandemic and delivering immigration services to companies and individuals, because I don't know what else to say, because it's been heroic efforts. And I actually have a Superman mask. I don't know what, I think my husband took it home. And I am going to wear some kind of crazy costume with all our friends when we can do this in person.
Yeah.
So let's take the questions from the floor. No guarantees I know anything. Because people say, I joined this group on Facebook called the Junior Immigration and Refugee Lawyers. And I made a comment. So they said to me, "What are you doing in this group?" I said, "I'm junior. I've only been practicing COVID immigration since March. What are you talking about?"
Exactly. Okay. So we're going to teach our viewers here a couple little lessons. So when they hear that sound right there, that means that is a legal question that Betsy and I cannot answer because it is too specific and relates specifically to your situation. So if you hear this, then what happens is you have to go and over here, and we'll open up this right here, and we will jump over to Betsy's page and we'll click on the contact here. And you will need to go to Betsy's page and fill out this form and book a paid consultation so that we can properly address your question. Now, Betsy's way smarter than I am, but if you can't get into her right away, then you can flip over to my firm and book a consult with me. So that's what I'm going to address to start with here, is that if you hear this sound, and we'll point it out if you post a question, yes, we won't. We probably will do that one versus this one. Okay, so we'll stick with the little triangle sound, but that means it's legal advice, and so the information that we're sharing here is designed to help as many people as possible with situations that are generic. So we're going to qualify it as that. None of this is to be taken as legal advice, because how in the world can we properly advise you if you're only giving us a 2-line comment in a YouTube live stream? So I think everybody that's tuning in now that knows this site, that it is definitely, that's how we roll here. Okay, so I do want to put out I want to post some shout outs, and I know it's hard for you to see this, Betsy, but I'm going to read it to you. So Salim says, as always, nice content, valuable information, good luck, and thank you guys for your time. See, you're very, very welcome. Okay, now let's jump over here and let's see if we can tackle this one. I'm going to try to see if I can stretch this out a little bit longer so we can get maybe some of these longer questions. See how I can play with this stuff while we're going live here? It's crazy. So Miko says, hey, Mark and Betsy, can you talk about previous USA 2-year overstay visa effect on Canada PR? Currently in the home country, the overstay was about 4.5 years ago. So this person is asking, what impact, if I've overstayed in the US, I'm now home in my home country, will that prevent me from being able to immigrate to Canada? Now we'll assume this is an express entry related question. I've got my own views on this, but Betsy, what do you think? Do you think, well, here's the response that some overseas agents will give. Oh, don't say anything about it. Don't disclose it. Okay. So I'm pretty sure you're with me. There's no way in hell you're not going to disclose this to immigration in some form or fashion. So, but this is technically an overstay, right? Right. It's not an actual refused visa, at least based on what Miko has said here. This is someone who's overstayed, and I'm assuming Miko is going to have to disclose it in their personal history. So what do you think? Is it, when he discloses it, and is it going to be a negative, something that's going to prevent him from becoming a PR if he otherwise meets everything? What do you think?
It's all, as you know, Mark, it's all client specific. So we have to understand what the circumstance that led to the overstay. But absolutely, it has to be declared. We have to give a rationale as to why it happened. And it will, in fact, go to the issue as to whether the person concerned will comply with the terms of his stay. Now, if he's only applying for permanent residence and he's not seeking an interim work permit or any other type of interim temporary residence status, then perhaps it can be explained depending on the facts. But then you have the issue as to whether there's an equivalent offense under Canadian law for having overstayed. And I was just talking about this today, and the issue is overstaying in the United States equivalent to overstaying in Canada,
which is an offense under our Act of Parliament.
And then the issue is, has it been cured by operation of law or passage of time? So there's no exact answer because it has to be very fact specific to the individual. Like, did he overstay like he was a visitor and he just happened to stay for 2 years and then worked under the table? Or was he an overstay because his grandmother was sick and there was no one else to take care of her? So we need a little bit more content, but absolutely disclosed. I definitely think that it would have a direct impact and definitely result in a refusal if there was an interim temporary residence application. But whether it would have any significant impact on the permanent application is whether it's material to the application. So, it certainly goes to the credibility of the applicant. But the lawyer's job, of course, would be to absolutely figure out what it is that led to this, And if it was intentional, well, so be it. Maybe the person was a young person at the time, didn't have a full appreciation for immigration laws, maybe had other pressures, financial pressures, family pressures. A lot of people do things because of external
Yes,
pressures.
you
But
bet.
at
And
the
I'm
end of
going to
the day,
flip
I
over
don't
here,
think
Betsy.
this
Yep.
gentleman is not going to be getting into Canada on a temporary basis.
Yeah. And temporary, you're shot down for sure. Miko,
Yeah.
I'm pointing you over here to Betsy's site. So right there or right here, these two places, this is where you need to go because your situation, we need a whole lot more information. Now, with that being said, I'm going to put it back up one more time. You guys know that watch this. Igor Krylyuk, my paralegal, who is on his way to becoming a lawyer, was in the US working, and he unfortunately retained the wrong immigration attorney who botched his the O visa for his spouse, and it resulted in them falling out of status. And he did continue to work because they had no way of getting home because he had no money, and there's a whole bunch of other circumstances. Igor is now in Canada working for my law firm. And
Excellent.
Igor fully disclosed everything in his express entry application. And actually, Betsy, Tamara, sorry, from your office, I reached out to her to see if she knew of any case law or anything related to this. And she gave me a little bit of direction and advice that helped significantly in how I answered that. We disclosed everything. The key, Miko, you disclose every single thing. And in the end, Igor and his wife are permanent residents of Canada now because I made the argument that none of that was sufficient to constitute an inadmissibility under the Immigration Act or anything else. Now, with more severe measures taken by U.S. immigration authorities, deportations, things like that, that's a different argument. But my position is if you've overstayed, then I think you've got a real good fighting chance as long as you disclose it fully and don't conceal anything. And remember, Miko, if you're in the US, it doesn't matter. Canada can figure out everything regarding your immigration history anyways because of the information sharing agreements. So there you go.
Yeah. And the other thing is he may want to get a U.S. lawyer to do a Freedom of Information request to make sure that he can provide the actual U.S. immigration records to back up his explanation.
Yep, exactly. And there, Miko has already given a little thanks. You're very welcome, Miko. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Okay, now remember, guys, if you're asking, hey, am I eligible for immigration? We're not going to answer that. That's 100%. That's this. And that's why your question isn't being pulled up. But let's see who else here. Okay. And Miko says, okay, I'm planning to disclose the info on my application. That's good, Miko. All right. Okay. Yes. Okay, let's see what else we have here. If you guys have any questions that you want either Betsy or I to answer, please go ahead. Okay, Muhammad says, thanks, Mark and Betsy. You guys make us laugh and happy in this pandemic COVID. That's great. Okay, let's see. Okay, and I think we've got, so Miko, you already answered. We already answered that question in some form. Okay, this is a great one. So Alva says, Betsy is on fire. I like her. I appreciate you guys for your time. Much love. See, we get lots of love here, Betsy. That's why I love doing this stuff here. Let's see. Okay, here's a good one. So this is one that, my goodness, I don't think there's anyone even within government can answer this question. He says, any news on reopening VFS for South America, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Bolivia, Chile, etc.?
I heard an amazing story out of Argentina last week from our colleague David Chalk. So I was talking to David because he had an Argentinian foreign worker, and he was telling me that VFS was closed, but was amazing. He's saying that the Canadian embassy in Argentina is wonderful, and what they actually did is they had the client actually go and attend in person at the visa office, and the person concerned submitted their passport like in the old days. And they put the counterfoil in the office in the passport, and the guy booked his flight. And apparently, Buenos Aires is a wonderful visa office. So that's all I know. That's the latest I know. But I was very impressed.
That is awesome. That is a great, great story, a great example. There are positive things happening out in that crazy world.
Yeah.
Raphael,
Yeah.
I also want to say that I think generally speaking, it all comes down to, the country conditions, the spread of the virus, the ability, to overcome the social distancing requirements, and the ability for the visa offices who are operating on skeleton crews to be restaffed. So in many cases, the VFS offices who, they're not, they're not exempt from anything else that, the actual Canadian visa offices are suffering from. If the country says you can't get everyone together, and you know how cramped those offices are, if you can't, because of the requirement for social distancing, if you can't have employees there, then the office isn't going to open up. So that's so when the pandemic starts to lift, there's a vaccine, then that's kind of what I'm looking at least when I look at it. All right. And Raphael, he says, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to share this wonderful information with all of us. Big hugs out of Buenos Aires. So there you go.
I want to go to Buenos Aires. That's one on my bucket list.
Yep, exactly. All right. Yeah. I know there's so many. Did I tell you where I was supposed to go? Okay. We'll just pull this off for a second. I'm going to vent now. Okay. Guess where I was supposed to be March 18th? Guess.
Somewhere very exciting.
Yes. I was supposed to be on a plane destined for Egypt. And
oh my God.
wife and I, for our 25th anniversary, had planned to go to Egypt for about a week, then to stop off in Jordan to go check out Petra, and then spend a nice full week in Israel. And I had been looking forward to this for I can't tell you how many years. And yeah, so needless to say, not a happy camper here.
Well, at this point, I actually would love to just go to Gilligan's Island.
You're right. Fantasy Island. Take me there.
Yeah, all right. I'm sorry. You know what? I want to go somewhere good. Like I went to South Africa in 2011 and it's still in my soul and I got to get back to Africa. I was so taken with Africa. I don't know what it was. This little Jewish girl from Montreal all of a sudden has some kind of affinity with South Africa. But yeah, I think after this pandemic I got to go somewhere really far.
Awesome. Well, we'll finish, Betsy, with this last question and then we'll wrap it up. So Katie says, can a green card holder from the US come to Canada to get married these days? Does he have to quarantine 14 days in Canada? Is it only truck drivers or health workers who don't need quarantining? Oh my goodness. This is my personal favorite, right? This is what we deal with all the time, endlessly. Oh my goodness. So do you want to take a crack at that one there, Betsy?
Well, a green card holder from the USA, it depends on whether they are TRV exempt or not. So that's the first issue. If they're TRV exempt, yes, they can come overland or by air, but that's just in the high level. They can't come to get married, but they can come under the extended family member if they meet the definition of extended family member under the OIC. If they choose to get married in Canada, that's another issue. Do they have to quarantine? Yes, they do. However, my crazy case from Prescott, and I'm going to tell you about this crazy case, the guy never asked for a quarantine exemption, the guy that they shut him out because they thought he had a dual intent. But he never asked for a quarantine exemption. They gave him a quarantine exemption. He was stuck outside Canada for 3 weeks. We got him readmitted, and the quarantine exemption persisted. And I had to tell him to go into quarantine because he really wasn't exempt from quarantine, and I didn't want him to get fined. So yes, you have to be under a quarantine exemption unless you're coming for some compassionate reason for which you can get an advanced ruling as to whether you can get a quarantine exemption, but it doesn't sound like you qualify. And if you do need a visa, then you are going to need to make an application for a TRV, provided you have the first obtained the authorization from CIC to enter Canada as an extended family member. So it's kind of a dual track. You're making the exemption, you're making the visa application, then you have to get to Canada, no quarantine, get the app, get a quarantine pan, And truck drivers and health workers, God bless them, but you're not one of them.
Oh man, no, that's exactly it. So yeah, the reality is, it's not good for anyone these days, and anyone who's trying to maintain any kind of a relationship across the border or internationally, it's just not easy. And many lives are being put on hold, and we have tremendous compassion for people. We really do. Well, I think we've reached the end of the stream here. Betsy, thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun. This sets the stage for the rambling craziness that is going to happen as I bring on all these lawyers who can just talk freely about whatever they want to. And it's been a real pleasure to just sit and just kind of chat like we're around a fire. Maybe I should have this this image of a nice fire pit. And I understand your husband has got a nice, beautiful fire pit there at your house that you're in love with.
It's ugly as hell. I wish somebody could come help me put it to the curb. But it's too heavy for me to carry by myself.
Awesome.
But anyway, yeah, no, it was a lot of fun, Mark. Thanks for having me. And maybe we conveyed something to your audience, but I haven't been feeling like the most intellectual over the last 8 months.
Yeah. Well, I think we're all burnt out. We really are.
Yeah.
We're completely, the brain is just fried, and we just need to take some time away. That's kind of where we're at.
And the other blessing about COVID is that colleagues like you and I and our extended family of immigration colleagues, this has brought us together, and we're never going to forget this in our rocking chairs when we're in the senior citizens home.
No, we will not. We will remember these days forever.
Yes, fondly.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share one last little comment. This one's from Katie, and she says, "Thank you, angels." I love these terms of endearment. Boy, that's the one thing that I love more than anything, interacting with people all over the world, these lovely terms of endearment. Well, thanks so much, Betsy. And as we indicated before, if you have specific legal questions that you need answered, go here to Betsy's site, connect in here, book a paid consult, and she can point you in the right direction. And same thing goes, all you have to go is to our site, and both of these links are right below in the description here of this video. So thanks so much, Betsy. It was a pleasure.
Have a good weekend.
Take care. See you.
Bye. Bye.